The sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. That's a beautiful line from Jacques Cousteau. And while the sea definitely holds wonder, today we're diving into a story where it's being tangled up, quite literally, not by magic, but by something, well, far more damaging that we've created. Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into a really critical environmental issue. It was laid out in a recent BBC article looking at illegal fishing traps off the coast of Sicily. Quite stunning waters there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this deep dive, it's designed to quickly get you up to speed on something that's frankly highly relevant for understanding the environmental challenges we face today, conservation efforts.
And it's the kind of thing, that's just good general knowledge. Could even be important if you're studying for exams, say, like the UPSC.
Exactly. So our mission here is really to unpack the details from this source, pull out the key insights, and help you understand the different layers of what's actually a pretty complex problem.
And right at the heart of the BBC's report is the organization Sea Shepherd. They're on this intense mission, basically hunting down and removing these illegal ocean traps. Specifically, things called fish aggregating devices, FADs for short.
FADs. Okay, let's unpack that term first. For anyone listening who hasn't come across it, what exactly are these FADs?
Well, think of them like artificial floating islands, almost. They're man-made structures that fishermen put out in the open water. They're usually anchored way down, sometimes miles down to the seafloor.
Okay. And why do they do that?
Because certain types of fish, especially pelagic fish, those are the ones living out in the open ocean, they're naturally drawn to floating objects. It provides structure, maybe shelter, maybe food sources gather there. So the fish congregate around the FAD.
Making them easier to catch, I imagine.
Exactly. It concentrates the fish, making fishing more efficient, at least in the short term.
Okay, so that's a FAD in principle. But this article zeroes in on illegal ones. And the description of what they're made of sounds pretty bad.
It really is. That's where the core environmental problem begins.
Yeah.
The BBC piece describes these illegal FADs being built from, well, just a mess of plastic waste.
Like what kind of waste?
We're talking used fuel containers, canisters that held pharmaceuticals, chemical drums. Basically, whatever plastic junk is cheap, floats, and is easy to get hold of.
Wow.
And then this collection of trash is sort of held together with dark plastic nets.
Oh.
Heavy rocks are used as weights, sometimes even buckets filled with cement as anchors. And the crucial, really damaging part is that it's all connected by potentially miles and miles of thin nylon thread.
Miles of nylon thread. Okay, so the materials themselves are a huge red flag. What makes these illegal FADs made of all this plastic and thread such a disaster for the marine environment?
The impacts are, they hit on multiple levels. The most immediate, the most visible is the entanglement risk. Just picture it. Miles of this strong, thin nylon line plus tangled nets just hanging there in the water.
A death trap, basically.
Absolutely. The article really highlights this. Marine life gets caught up sharks. Sea turtles are very vulnerable. Even big animals like humpback whales and dolphins, they get hopelessly tangled.
Which leads to
Injury, starvation because they can't hunt or feed properly or simply drowning, suffocation. It's like ghost fishing, where lost gear keeps catching animals. But here the gear was intentionally placed and then often just abandoned.
And it's not just the entanglement, right? There are other impacts, too.
No, definitely not. These big floating plastic rafts, they can act like transport ships for invasive species. Little organisms can attach themselves and get carried to new areas, potentially disrupting local ecosystems.
Right.
And then inevitably, these FADs break loose from their anchors. Storms rip them free. They don't just vanish. They wash up on beaches, polluting coastlines, or they snag on sensitive habitats like coral reefs, causing direct physical damage.
And the anchors themselves, the stuff on the seabed. The article mentions a researcher, Teresa Romeo.
Yes, from the Sicily Marine Center. She's been studying FADs for decades, and she makes a really important point. The anchors, whether they're rocks or those cement buckets, they physically change the environment on the seafloor.
How so?
They just smother whatever was living there, disrupt the habitat. So you've got damage from the floating structure and damage right down at the anchor point on the seabed. It affects everything down there.
So it's impacting the whole water column, surface to seafloor.
Pretty much.
Right.
And then there's the impact on the fish populations themselves. The article focuses on the area around Sicily's Aeolian Islands. The FADs there tend to attract specific species, including juvenile fish.
Young fish.
Yeah, young ricciola, which is a type of amberjack, young bluefin tuna, juvenile swordfish, pilotfish. By concentrating these fish, including the young ones, the FADs make it easy to catch them before they've had a chance to grow up and reproduce.
So it's undermining the future of the fish stocks.
Exactly. It's not just about catching fish now. It's damaging the population's ability to sustain itself. It's a classic case of short-term gain leading to long-term ecological harm.
What really struck me in the BBC piece was the sheer scale of this, particularly in the South Tyrrhenian Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean.
Oh, it's genuinely shocking. Andrea Morello, who's the president of Sea Shepherd Italy, he's quoted describing it as potentially the biggest marine environmental disaster ever. It's a huge statement.
Wow.
And he uses this chilling phrase saying, the sea there is like a minefield full of FAD lines.
A minefield of plastic fishing gear. And Sea Shepherd's estimate for the number of these things.
They estimate over 36,000 illegal FADs just in the South Tyrrhenian Sea.
36,000.
And remember, each one can have almost 1.2 kilometers, that's about 0.7 miles, of nylon line.
Do the math on that.
Yeah.
It's just an astronomical amount of plastic line.
It is, and they give a concrete example that really brings it home. Around just one island, Alacuti, they found 912 FADs in a single night's operation.
912 in one night.
Yeah. And if you calculate the estimated total lengths of line from just those FADs found in one night around one island, it comes out to something like 43,200 kilometers.
Wait, hang on. 43,200 kilometers. That's more than the circumference of the Earth, isn't it?
It is. Think about that. The
Yeah.
potential line associated with FADs found in one effort around one island could wrap around the planet. It just underscores the incredible density and volume of this stuff out there.
That's staggering.
And this isn't a new problem they just discovered. Sea Shepherd says that since 2017, they've removed over 2,500 kilometers of these anchored plastic lines from the Med.
2,500 kilometers.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, that's roughly the distance driving from Paris to Moscow. Just discarded plastic fishing line.
Unbelievable. So remind us, why exactly are these particular FADs illegal in Italy?
Okay, so the article clarifies this.
Sure.
Italian law actually requires FADs to be made from biodegradable materials. These ones, the target of Operation CISO, are made from plastic, which obviously isn't biodegradable.
Right.
Plus, they're missing things they should have by law. They don't have GPS tracking devices, and they lack specific markings that would allow authorities to trace them back to the boat that put them there.
Ah, so they're untraceable.
Exactly. And Nicola Silvestri, a frigate captain with the Italian Coast Guard quoted in the piece, confirms it's both the illegal material and the lack of traceability that makes them illegal.
Okay. Illegal, environmentally devastating, bad for fish stocks, deployed on a mind-boggling scale. The obvious question is, why? Why is this happening?
Well, Andrea Morello from Sea Shepherd points straight at the economics.
Yeah.
He describes these illegal FADs as being very cheap to produce.
Ah, the cost factor again. It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
Often, yes. For the fishermen using them, it's a low-cost, high-return method, at least initially. They can put them out in August, fish around them during the peak summer season.
And then what happens to them?
And then, the article suggests, they basically just leave them. They rely on the heavy winter storms to break the FADs free from their anchors. The storms then disperse all that plastic waste across the ocean.
So the disposal is nature's problem.
Effectively, yes. From the fisherman's point of view, it's free disposal. But of course, it just creates tons and tons of marine debris and pollution. It's prioritizing that immediate cheap catch over any consideration for the long-term health of the sea.
Which leads us neatly to Sea Shepherd and Operation CISO. What are they actually doing out there to combat this?
Their approach is very direct, very hands-on. They are actively hunting down these illegal FADs and physically removing them from the water. They call themselves FAD hunters.
FAD hunters, I like that.
Yeah, and they also describe their work as carrying out the first census of FADs ever realized in the Mediterranean Sea.
That census part is crucial, isn't it, for understanding the scale we just talked about?
Absolutely. It's not just pulling stuff out randomly. It's systematic. So how do they do it? They use a vessel called the Sea Eagle. It's actually a former pilot boat.
And who's on board?
What's really interesting is the crew. They're volunteers. They come from all over the world. The article mentions Canada, Germany, Israel, Pakistan, different ages, different backgrounds. You've got students, retired engineers, all sorts working together.
A real international effort, so they're out there scanning the horizon.
Pretty much using radar, high-powered binoculars, searching for these often quite small floating markers. They mentioned running covert missions sometimes, presumably to avoid conflict with the illegal fishers.
Right, and once they find one.
Then the hard work starts. They have to locate the anchor line, which goes way down, remember, and detach it from the seabed. They use a powerful winch to haul the whole thing up the line, the nets, the plastic junk, the anchor.
That must take some effort.
Oh, yeah. The article mentions that extracting just one line, maybe 2 kilometers long, can take about an hour of pretty intense physical labor. They're out there working from dawn till sunset.
And you mentioned cataloging. Someone specific does that.
Yes. The piece highlights one volunteer, Zafar from Pakistan, whose role is specifically to measure and catalog every single FAD they pull out, what it's made of, how long the line is, where it was found. All that goes into their database.
So it's removal and research data collection? Are they working alone out there?
No. And that's another key point. The article stresses their collaboration. They work with the Italian authorities, like the Coast Guard. There's mention of a Coast Guard boat monitoring their work, and the authorities seize the illegal materials once Sea Shepherd brings them ashore.
So the authorities are involved in confirming the illegality.
Exactly. Captain Silvestri confirms this partnership. And they're also working closely with researchers.
Ah, okay. Who's analyzing all that data Zafar is collecting?
Institutions like the National Biodiversity Future Center at the University of Palermo and the SEMA Research Foundation. A marine biologist named Alberto Secchi confirms just how valuable Sea Shepherd's data is. It allows them to use statistical analysis, create maps year on year since 2017.
To actually visualize this ghost labyrinth, as they call it.
Precisely, to show the extent and density of the problem.
Okay, so they're hunting, removing, mapping, collecting data. But what happens to all the plastic junk they haul onto the deck? Disposing of that must be a massive headache.
It absolutely is for any marine cleanup. But this is where they've developed a really quite brilliant collaboration. They've partnered with an Italian company called Imilani.
And what do they do?
Imilani specializes in making things out of recycled plastic, specifically sturdy crates.
Okay, so they take the FAD waste.
Exactly. This led to something they call the Sea Turtle Crates Project. They take the recovered plastic waste from the FADs, the containers, the lines, everything, and Imilani processes it and turns it into durable plastic crates.
Not just any crates, though, right?
Right. They're specifically designed for sea turtle rescue operations.
Wow, okay, so let me get this straight. Turtles get tangled in the FADs.
Or injured by them, yes.
Sea Shepherd might find them, or someone else rescues them, and then these injured turtles are transported to vets or rehab centers.
In crates, made from the very same type of plastic pollution that likely harmed them in the first place.
That's actually amazing, a closed loop almost.
It's incredibly symbolic and practical. Roberto Milani, the company founder, says they've already helped rescue 6 loggerhead turtles using these crates, and they've made about 100 of the recovery boxes so far.
That's fantastic.
And they're even looking at making other things pens, little gadgets from the recycled FAD plastic, hoping to sell them to raise funds for Sea Shepherd's work.
So that whole setup, the NGO doing the cleanup, the police providing oversight, the researchers analyzing data, and a private company recycling the waste into something useful for conservation. That sounds like a really powerful model.
Andrea Morello from Sea Shepherd certainly sees it that way. He calls this alliance a solution to protect the deep sea. It tackles the problem on multiple fronts: removal, understanding, and even turning the waste stream into a conservation tool.
It's definitely an inspiring story of action, but the article doesn't just present that side. It also brings in other perspectives and acknowledges that it's not quite that simple, right? There are still challenges.
Absolutely. It's important to get that full picture. We mentioned Teresa Romeo earlier, the director of the Sicily Marine Center.
Yeah, the researcher who studied FADs for decades.
Right. So while she definitely appreciates the mapping work Sea Shepherd is doing, showing everyone the scale of the problem, her long-term view is maybe a bit different.
She thinks just removing them isn't the ultimate answer.
Kind of. Her argument, based on her long research, is that the focus shouldn't only be on drastic removal. It needs to be about effective regulation of FADs overall.
Regulation, like what?
Well, she strongly advocates for making it mandatory for fishermen to recover all their FADs after the fishing season, not just abandoning them or letting storms break them up.
Okay, accountability.
Exactly. And she also proposes developing a proper spatial management plan, basically mapping out specific, limited areas where FADs could be used legally rather than just anywhere, and, crucially, pushing for the replacement of all those plastic materials with genuinely biodegradable alternatives.
Right. Get rid of the polluting plastic in the first place.
That's the ideal goal.
Right.
Transitioning fishing gear to biodegradable, non-toxic materials is seen by many as essential for reducing plastic pollution in the long run. Teresa Romeo suggests these materials might also leach fewer harmful toxins into the water compared to some plastics.
But the article makes it clear that switching to biodegradable FADs it's not exactly straightforward, is it?
No, not at all. There's a major hurdle highlighted by both Alberto Secchi, the marine biologist, and Teresa Romeo herself.
Yeah.
Cost.
Yeah.
Creating a FAD that's fully biodegradable and strong enough to work effectively, especially the long anchor lines, it's technically challenging. And the materials they might use, like natural fibers, say hemp thread,
Would be much more expensive than plastic.
way more expensive.
Yeah.
You need kilometers of line for each FAD. Alberto Secchi and Teresa Romeo both point out that fishermen, especially those currently using the super cheap illegal plastic ones, just wouldn't spend that kind of money on expensive biodegradable alternatives like hemp.
So even if the technology exists and improves, the economic barrier is huge.
It really is. It highlights that core tension. The environmental need for sustainable practices versus the economic reality for the fishing industry. Finding a solution isn't just about banning the bad stuff, it's about making the good stuff feasible and enforcing the rules effectively.
Okay, so stepping back from the specifics, why does all this matter to you, the person listening right now?
Well, this story, which we've unpacked from the BBC report, it's just a brilliant case study. It touches on so many important contemporary issues. If you're interested in environmental science, you've got marine ecosystems, plastic pollution, invasive species, habitat destruction, all laid out very clearly.
Right, and for conservation.
You see, the critical role of NGOs like Sea Shepherd, the power of international volunteerism, those innovative partnerships like the Recycling Project, and the whole challenge of tackling environmental crime on the water.
It also gives insight into governance and law, doesn't it? You see the Italian regulations, how environmental crime is defined, but also the huge difficulties authorities face in actually enforcing those laws when the activity is so widespread and often covert.
Definitely. And from an economics angle, it's a stark lesson. You see the immediate financial incentive for the cheap, illegal methods versus the massive but often hidden environmental costs. Plus, you see the real economic barriers holding back sustainable alternatives.
And you even mentioned sociology, the diverse group of volunteers, the different perspectives within the fishing world and conservation groups.
Exactly. To really grasp this issue, you need to look at it from all these different angles. And it's precisely that kind of multifaceted understanding that's so valuable, whether it's just for your own general knowledge or if you're preparing for something like the UPSC exams, or really any situation that requires thinking critically about complex, real-world problems.
So this deep dive has hopefully given you a really solid grounding in this complex environmental battle playing out in the Mediterranean. We've looked at the huge problem of these illegal plastic FADs off Sicily, the devastating costs, environmental and ecological, the economic factors driving their use.
And Sea Shepherd's really impressive, multi-pronged response. The hunting and removal, the crucial mapping and data collection, the collaborations, and that fantastic recycling initiative turning trash into a tool for rescue.
But we've also touched on those vital alternative perspectives, particularly the focus on regulation and preventing the pollution in the first place, and importantly, the significant economic hurdles that make sustainable solutions like biodegradable gear so difficult to implement right now.
Which brings us to a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. Given the truly massive scale of this FAD problem, this minefield, and the very real economic barriers to fishermen adopting sustainable alternatives, what does the most realistic path forward look like? How do we strike the right balance between, say, much tougher enforcement against the illegal stuff, investing in technological innovation to make biodegradable gear cheaper and better, and somehow addressing the economic pressures on fishing communities? Finding that balance seems key if we genuinely want to protect these vital marine ecosystems.
That is a complex puzzle. Definitely no easy answers there. Thank you so much for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of illegal FADs.
Yeah, we really hope this discussion has helped illuminate what's quite a pressing issue and maybe given you some valuable insights to think about.
If you found this interesting or useful, please do remember to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We'll be back with more explorations of important topics pulled from current sources.
And we genuinely would love to hear your thoughts. Do you have any further questions about FADs or ideas on the solutions? Please drop us a comment below.